Hi, good afternoon on the East Coast. I don't know if it's morning where some of you guys are watching. Good to see you guys on. I'm going to be doing a quick 15-20 minute lunch hour talk on relationships and marriage and all of that. Generally, people will ask me questions about relationships. They'll ask me about marriage. And when I first started Ask Dr. Faith Inc., we did a lot of, we had a lot of resources, a lot of courses around marriage prep, around, meeting the one and all of that, as well as marriages, how to sustain your marriage, how to grow your marriage. And so I wanted to give you guys some tips on how to maintain healthy relationships in the quarantine. So it's not just for married folks, it's for everybody. In this hour, there's some things that are really, really important that we need to be able to do in order to help sustain our relationship. So this is to prepare us. Tonight, we have a free webinar specifically on communication and conflict resolution. One of the things that I figured was that during this whole time, there are probably people living in close proximity with people that they don't spend a lot of time with. And when you have to spend a lot of time with someone that you normally don't spend that much time with, oftentimes things come up and it can be really difficult to navigate. So I want to give you guys 7 things on how to make sure that your relationship/marriage survives, not only during this time, but for those of you guys that are single, when you get married, this is going to be very applicable as well. And then I will take some questions around marriage. People are always saying, there's all these marriage prep information and classes, but what about us married folks? And yes, I believe that marriage needs to be sustained. So if you are single, like I said, hang out because you're going to get some tips that are going to help you. And it's also going to help you in your other relationships that are non-romantic. So I am live on Periscope, Facebook, and Instagram. I decided to jump on there today since I don't go live on here a lot. But let's talk about just several tips that I'm going to give you guys. And then, like I said, we'll do the Q&A and I'll share all the different things that are going on. But tonight is our free webinar on mastering communication, on mastering conflict resolution, which I think is really important. All right, looks like we are ready to get going. So I'm just going to jump right in. I think the most important thing, one of the most important things in your relationships, in your marriage, especially during this time, but ongoing, is that you maintain a sense of identity and you maintain a sense of purpose. So this is really important, that oftentimes when people did not go through marriage prep and did not go through the right counseling, they get married and then their whole identity is wrapped around the person that they have married. And it can become really frustrating trying to figure out who you are, trying to figure out how to get back to who you are. So before you get married, this is the time. If you're single and you're still not sure as to why you dress the way that you dress, why you think the way that you think, why you make decisions the way that you make them, that you do the work with the Lord to do that. And then if you're already married, you want to make sure that within your marriage, because this is the hard part. In marriage, you're supposed to be one, right? But God has also created you to be unique. He has given you different giftings. He has given you different assets that are to also glorify Him. And so the most important thing within marriage, and this can happen within 6 months, it can happen if you've been married for 25 years. And actually in a good way, it happens to people that are really bonded, right? So when people are, sometimes when they're really bonded, it happens in one or two ways. If you didn't have a clear sense of identity, if you looked for security and you looked for purpose in your spouse, then you're going to look for them to give you that identity ongoing. And then you have some people that are just really connected. They're really one, that it's really about the marriage and not necessarily about them as individuals. And that can be healthy to a certain extent, because anytime in a marriage where their individual is is magnified over the marriage, then the marriage is not going to be healthy. The goal of marriage, obviously, is for the two to become one. So you want to make sure that you're creating that balance where you understand, okay, he loves this, but I don't necessarily love this. And that's okay. I communicate this way and he doesn't communicate that way. And that doesn't make either of us more right or more wrong. Those are the things that you need to work out and you need to be talking through. So if you're already married, don't just be like, oh, I know everything about that person, because that's what I get from couples all the time. They make these assumptions that because they've been with someone for a really long time, that they already know what they like. They already know how they communicate. They already know how they behave. But the truth is, in order to keep your marriage fresh, you have to be checking in on a consistent basis. Don't make any assumptions that you already know them because we've been together since we're 15. People change and people will go in opposite directions if they do not communicate. This is what happens when people have been married 10, 15 years and it's like they just flipped on me. I don't even know who they are. It's like I woke up and they're a totally different person. The truth is that they were evolving and they were changing the whole time, but either one of you guys did not take the time out to say, hey, what do you still feel the same way about this? Do you still, believe this about God? Do you still have the same faith? Oftentimes we could just get on this cruise control in our relationships and you cannot, I always say this all the time, you cannot do friendships on cruise control. You cannot do marriage on cruise control. You have to be very intentional in getting to know each other over and over again. So you want to really grow in identity within your marriage and even before you get married, even within friendships, even in the non-romantic way, because if you are not clear about who you are, you're going to be bending left and right, pleasing people, getting validation from people. And you will see that even in marriage where it's all about the other person, or you feel like if you do what the person wants you to do, then they're going to love you. These are all inner healing stuff that is important to work on. So that's one. The next thing that you want to focus on to grow and to maintain, especially during this time. Well, let me give you some practical tips. So during this time, take some time to discover yourself, even if you're already married. And I know it's hard because I got kids. So those of you guys who got little kids, it's like what time, right? The 5 minutes at the end of the day. Take that time to reflect upon what you're thinking, what's going on with you internally. What are your hopes? What are your beliefs? What is your 5-year vision plan? What is your 10-year vision plan? And then if you're married, begin to share that with your spouse. Begin to most of us just need to get through these next 2 months, or we just need to get through this next 6 weeks. But what about using this time, if you're single, to really do the hard work of figuring out who you are? And if you're married, making time to get into a deeper relationship with your spouse. I'm going to talk about that in a second. The next thing that you want to do is spend time in prayer. One of the things that's going to help reduce conflict, especially right now, is spending your time. Don't go out of your schedule. So some people, what happens is before they were working at home, they would get up, they would pray, they would get ready or pray in the car. And they had this routine schedule that was helping keep their spirit alive and helping them able to maintain. But when everything went haywire, right? For a lot of us, I read today that 315 million of us, 96%. Now I've always worked from home, so this is not a big change except my kids are here. But a lot of us are now trying to adjust to this. If you don't make your intimate time with the Lord a priority, it's going to run over into your marriage. It's going to run over into your friendships. It's going to run over into your relationships with your family, because there's already a lot of external pressure that a lot of us are not processing, right? We're just trying to cope. We're just trying to get through it. A lot of us are trying to be joyful, but we can all feel it. We're in a season and in a time that we have never been in before. So you cannot use the same coping mechanisms or the same tools that you used in the past to assume that they're going to help you in this season. So if you had a routine before that included time in worship, time in prayer, whether you're married or single, you need to make sure that you're making that a priority right now, because it's going to help you hear the voice of God. It's going to help encourage you. It's going to help you have clarity concerning God's heart. It's going to help you be calm. It's going to help you begin to see things from a different perspective. So some of the YouTubes that I've done that you can find on my YouTube channel is, how to rest and how to sit in heavenly places. But if you're not spending time in relationship with the Lord, it's going to fuel over into your other relationships. You're going to be snappy. You're going to be unforgiving because of the external pressure. You've got to understand that what we're dealing with right now is not just internal, but there's so many other things that are going on externally. So you got to make sure that you're praying individually. If you're a couple, make sure you're praying individually, but you're also making time to pray together, to stay in the presence of the Lord together, because this is the time where the enemy would love to come in and breach. So one of the things that I always say about marriage, about relationships, is that the enemy hates them because he's afraid of the power of agreement. Scripture tells us wherever two or three come together in agreement, the Spirit of God is there. So what you will find the enemy do is try to create breaches in our friendships, breaches in our marriages. The moment that he can cause us to come out of agreement, he has authority in that relationship. And so he will want you to argue over toilet paper. He'll want you to argue with, over how you're going to work with the kids. He's going to want you to argue over who's right and who's wrong, because anytime you create that breach, anytime there is a difference, and this is not just in marriage, this is in our friendships as well, we now give him access. So the biggest area that you have to protect in your marriages, in your friendships, in your relationships is your agreement. What are you walking in agreement about? Who are you in agreement with? The things that you're in agreement with are the things that fuel your life. I'm going to say that again. The things that you're in agreement with are the things that fuel your life. And this means even if I agree with the truth concerning who I am in the Lord, that's what's going to fuel me. If I agree with lies that I can't do this, I'm not an overcomer, that's what's going to fuel me. If I agree that my husband is the best thing that the Lord has given me, even though we may be arguing right now, that's what's going to fuel the atmosphere and the presence around us. So you got to watch what you've come into agreement with, because some of us are living in our friendships, in our families, in our relationships with these internal agreements like, man, this is the best that it's going to get. Well, if you're being sarcastic and saying things like this is the best that's going to get, but you don't really mean it, then that's what's really going to happen. Whatever a man thinketh, so is he. I always say that we are a total sum of our beliefs. What we believe is connected to our behavior, and it's connected to what we see around us. So you want to make sure that you're taking time to challenge and pray and come out of agreement. And this goes with if you're with your toxic mama during this time, right? If you're staying with your, annoying brother, whatever it is, you want to make sure that you're challenging any lies and acknowledging any places where you don't have to be in disagreement unnecessarily. The next thing that you want to do is you want to schedule time together. And this first for the marriages, because you're at home, you assume that, oh, we're always together, or even for family, or even your children. Oh, we're at home, we're always together. But there is something about intentionally scheduling time. It means that you are important to me. What we're doing here is important to me. So we're setting apart time. I know that when we wake up, we see each other. When we go to bed, we see each other. But 1:00 on Thursdays, we're going to have lunch together outside. Some of y'all are still, in Chicago where it's cold, but wherever you are, we're going to have lunch, maybe just in a separate part of the house, right? Not everybody has a 4,000 square foot house. Some of you guys live in smaller places. You got to figure out how to create sacred spaces. Sacred spaces. This is very important, especially in marriage. Things like your bedroom should be a sacred space. The only thing that should be going on in that bedroom is your talk with one another, is intimacy with one another. You shouldn't necessarily be doing all your work in your bedroom. You shouldn't be eating in your bedroom, because that then defiles that space. So you and your spouse need to make sure that somewhere, even though you can't go anywhere, for some of you it might just be on the porch, or it may be, like I said, part of your house, that you have that sacred space. For those of you guys who are not married, do this with your children. If you're a single parent, do this with your family members and say, Friday night, we are getting together intentionally. We are creating time because we're stuck in here anyway, but we're not going to act like we're actually spending quality time. Just because you're in the house together doesn't mean that you're actually spending quality time. Quality time is about taking a specific space where you guys are together. So I think I'm going to hit on that a little bit tonight. For those of you guys who are just jumping on, I wanted to remind everybody we have the free webinar tonight on how to master conflict and how to master your communication. So if you're already on our lists, you already got that login. So you want to make sure that you are scheduling that time together. This is going to work for families. It's going to work for marriages. Don't assume because we're together, then we're good. Because when this is all said and done, the same issues that you had going in are still going to be there if you don't take the time that you have right now to master your time together. The next thing that you want to do is you want to love each other based on the off of your love languages. And you can go to lovelanguage.com and take your love language. This is important because once you are in a space together, some people's love language is quality time. And so their love tank may be full and feel like I don't need anything else, where someone else's love language may be gifts, someone else's love language may be touch, someone else's love language may be actions. So you need to figure out your spouse's love language, and then you need to love them based off of that. You don't love people based off of your love language. You don't love your children based off of your love language. You love your children based off of their love language. You love your friends based off of their love language. So you need to figure it out. Don't just say, well, we're together, they know that I love them. No, 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 no. What can I do to show an act of service for you? Because that's how you receive love. What can I do to give you a small gift? It may be just a note that I write and you find, when you're making breakfast, what is it that I can do in this hour to show you? So don't get lazy. Married folks, don't get lazy during this time and think that, okay, because we're in the same place. Families, don't get lazy. Make sure that you are making just specific areas in your decisions to make sure that the other people around you feel loved and supported. I talked about scheduling time for your children. Oh, I didn't talk about it, but that's the fifth or sixth one. Scheduling time for your children. For those of you guys who have children, I have a schedule for my children. We have schoolwork and we go through the whole day. We have what we do, but on Fridays, we have what we call Fun Fridays. This is intentional time for our family, right? To get away. And the only getting away that we could do right now is walking on trails, which is fine with me because I'm a nature person. And so I'm like, this is amazing. An excuse to, explore all of that. But if you're not that, then do game time, then do, read some books together, figure out what you can, but figure out a way to get with your spouse when the children are also asleep, right? So if your children know that you have taken care of them, this is the married folks, and you have spent time specifically for them, you're not going to feel guilty, women, wives, that you're also taking time separately, specifically for your husband. What can happen in this type of scenario where your children are home and your spouse is home is that all the energy goes to the children and there is no energy left for your spouse. And it is extremely hard, especially if you're working and then you have the children and you're managing work plus the children and then your spouse. But you have to figure out how you can make sure that your spouse still feels special, still feels like they're not part of just the whole mumble jumble of everything that's going on. So being in quarantine and being in relationships is going to require creativity. It's not one of those things that you can cruise control. But not only being in quarantine, these are things that you need to sustain when you get married or if you are married. And then sex. Obviously, single people, this is not for you, right? This is for the married folks. You want to make sure that you prioritize that. Some of you guys may have more time because you don't have children. Some of you guys may have more energy because maybe your work said you don't have to work right now. Instead of just looking at the downsides of everything that is going on, figure out what can bring you joy. Look for the things that can actually make your marriage better. And this is the thing, and I'm not going to go into sex talk today. I'll do it another time or when I'm specifically working with married people. But a lot of times people that are married that have to go to work, you work from 9 to 5, you come home, cook dinner, clean the house, and then you want to be intimate with your spouse. You have a little bit more leeway to do that. You could clean in the morning or during a break if you have a lunch break on your job. However way, you have more space. So some of the excuses that some of us had when we didn't have this close proximity, you got to get rid of those. You got to get rid of these. And this is the thing though. If you're having a problem having sex with your spouse in quarantine, quarantine, that means that there were emotional and spiritual issues going on prior to right now, right? So I would encourage you to join the class tonight, maybe to help you work through some conflict, work through some internal things, because sex is going to be really difficult if you are not internally connected. And this is mainly for women, because women are very emotional, women are very hormonal. And so when they feel loved, when they feel appreciated, that's easier. Men, though, also need the consistent sex so that they can provide you the affirmation and the long talks that you desire. So there has to be a balance there, and you need to make sure that that is a priority while you're in quarantine for the married people. All right. The other thing that you guys want to do is make sure that you're talking to other people outside of your house. Whether you are married or not, if you're single and you're by yourself, then you really need to make sure that you are engaging yourself in communication with other people. Married folks, you need to have friends. And I always tell people this, because people be like, well, my spouse is my best friend. Yeah, they are, but you still need to have friends. It's kind of unhealthy, not even kind of, it's unhealthy to be married and you expect your spouse to fulfill all your emotional and relational needs. A husband is not wired like a woman. And so women need to have women friends. Usually it's healthier when they're also married, because it just helps be able to talk about certain things that you can also exhale. You could talk about things that for men, it bores them, or they just want to give you a solution to. Men need male friends. And this is whether you're married or not. And you need to have people outside of your marriage that you can talk to, that you trust, that are mature enough, that are champions of your marriage, but that you could have an outlet for. And it's going to be more important now than ever, because you're constantly with your spouse. Most of us, we're constantly with them, unless you're an essential worker. But you need to make sure that you can call a girlfriend. If you're a girl, you could, men, you can get on the phone, call, one of your fellas, bros, whatever y'all call each other, and exhale. And so that's important, not only in quarantine, that's important as a life lesson for a healthy marriage, period. And if you're in a marriage and you do not encourage your spouse to have male friends, if he's a male, or female friends if she's a female, then you have a codependency of some sort. Unless they are unhealthy, unless all the people around you guys are all toxic and unhealthy, but there should be some healthy people that you can connect to. All right, and the last one, and then I'll take some of your questions around relationships, marriage, for a couple of minutes, is find separate workspaces. And I know not everybody has the luxury that some of us do with the houses, and you have multiple offices and all of that, but find separate workspaces, even if it means you work at the kitchen table, I work in on the couch in the living room. Like, figure out, or even if it means you work, and I'm an entrepreneur, so my schedule is really free. I know everybody's not that way, but if you are, and you can say you work in the mornings over here and I work in the evenings over there, because you're already together so much, it is so important to give each other space. It is so important. And don't be like, no, he loves me. He loves me being all over him. Talk about it. Don't assume. This is the first one that I started. Don't assume, oh, he loves this. And deep down inside, she's boiling. Like, I wish I could just breathe. I wish I could just have some space. So figure out how, if you both have to work, how you could do that in separate spaces. All right. So those are my relationship quarantine tips. If you're in a house with 4 or 5 other people, your family is there, it's the same. See if there's a way that you can do that. All right. Let me answer some questions. I didn't link the free webinar. Instagram, I think I've shared it. You can check my Instagram page, but I'll link it to the YouTube and the Facebook. Periscope, you guys have to jump on my YouTube or Facebook, and you can find the link to register for the free webinar tonight. Once again, if you're already on our lists, you don't need to register, because we've sent out the login for you. All right, let's take some questions around marriage, around relationships for a couple of minutes. And it doesn't have to be connected to being quarantined inside. It could be just in general. Is dating supposed to be stressful? Heck no, right? So I believe that when the Lord brings you, first of all, I don't believe in dating. Dating is when you meet somebody and you say, hey, I like you, you like me, let's see where this goes, right? And you don't know how long where this goes. It could be for 6 months, it could be for 3 years, it could be for 5 years. So I don't believe in dating. I believe in courtship. I believe that as believers, we hear the Holy Spirit and we hear him for when we should move, when somebody is stank, when somebody's toxic. I believe that we can hear him for our spouse. I do believe that when you meet somebody, you have to go through what we call the information gathering stage, and you can get all this information in. Oh, I have 3 of my books here, but not the one that I was going to talk about. Journey to the Altar. I talk all about this, but you information gathering stage is like 3 months at max. Really, that's when you're trying to decide: do we have the same vision, purpose? Do we like each other? Are we attracted to each other? Have we prayed about being together? If we feel peace about that, then the next thing should be we're going to begin to court for the purpose of marriage. There shouldn't be, oh, well, let me see for another 4 or 5 months. I always tell people, especially men, they know within 3, 4 weeks if someone could be their wife. Whether they make them their wife or not, that's a different topic. So the reason dating is stressful oftentimes is because there is no end. Right. And so if you don't have clarity about what you're doing and where you're going and what this thing is becoming, there's going to be stress. And so when you enter into a courtship, you should have clarity that, okay, we're doing this maybe for a year. And that's usually a good time, 6 months to a year of us really getting to know each other, because we're going to get married. Within that time, you get engaged. I don't believe believers should be together more than 2 years if they live in the same city and not be married. So it shouldn't be stressful. But there are seasons where you have to learn each other. You have to deal with the differences that you got to work through it. But there should be a level of joy because you know God has called you together. So yeah, I can't stand you right now, but I'm going to fight through this and we're going to work through this because we already made a decision at the beginning that God put us together and we're in this for the long haul. So even working through the hard things should bring a level of joy, especially once you have resolved them. All right. Let's see questions here. Is it okay for a married man to have a female best friend? I don't think that's wise. I don't think it's even necessarily needed. I know people ask this stuff all the time. Your spouse should be your best friend in terms of the opposite sex. But there are people who were friends with people for a long, long time, and then they got married. That doesn't mean the man needs to dump all his friends because he's married. But what needs to happen is those friends should also be the wife's friends. Those friends should be able to call the wife and should be able to call the man. So I have a lot of best friends that are not best friends, but covenant friends that are males that I knew before my husband. So some of you guys know, like my friends Brian Meadows, Brian Williams. The good thing is that they're all married as well, but we were all single when we became really good friends. So when we got married, it wasn't like, oh, these are my friends. Like my husband knows them, my husband can talk to them, and that's how it should be. If you have friends that you had before you got married, there shouldn't be any conversations that your spouse can't see or can't look or can't ask about. I'm friends with their wives. I can message their wives. If there's any weird stuff where you feel like you can't do that, then there's something that's going on that shouldn't be going on. So if your spouse has a friend before you, that before they met you, that friend should also become your friend, and you should have a connection with them, and you should be able to talk with them without many issues. Now, it's the spouse's responsibility to create boundaries, to know that I can't be talking to this person on the phone at night. Who does that? Know that maybe texting is probably the best. If we talk, it should be maybe once a month or every other month. If they're talking every other day, texting all day long, something else is not right there. All right. This webinar is bit.ly/mind, body, and soul. So bit.ly. Let me see if I can put it in here for those of you guys who want to sign up for the webinar. All right, let's see what other questions we've got coming on in here on marriage while I get this link for you. Marriage, relationships in general. All right. Let's see. If you're having a hard time having sex in okay, yeah, someone was taking notes as I was talking. All right, questions. All right, where can I get resources on the Journey to the Altar? So that's my book. It's a book called Journey to the Altar, and you can pick it up at on Amazon. You can pick it up on Ask Dr. Faith. It's going to be an electronic copy on Ask Dr. Faith, but it's my book that I wrote to prepare those that are singles, those that are newlyweds, or those that are getting ready to get married on the things that are most important. So I wrote that book because research says the first 3 years of your marriage dictate whether or not that marriage is going to last. And so I wanted to cover the things that I was seeing that most counselors do not cover when it comes to marriage prep and marriage counseling. So you can pick it up there. What do you think of marriage with 13, 15 years age gap? It, to me, age is not that big of a deal. The biggest thing is maturity levels, right? Now, if the girl is 18 and the man is 30 something, then I'm going to be like, something is going on here. But if everybody's like in their mid 20s, late 20s, and then the person's in their 30s and 40s, I don't have a big deal about it. After like 15 years, I'm going to be like, ooh, let's talk through it. But I also know a lot of friends. I know people who've gotten married that are obviously, usually it's normal for the man to be older, not normal because that's not always true. It's harder when the woman is the one who's 13 or 15 years older. I will say that because you're going to need to make sure that that man is really, really mature and can really, really handle that difference. It's a little bit easier when the man is that much older, but you need to seek wisdom. You need to figure out why they weren't married up until this point. If they were divorced, what went on, work through all of that stuff. All right. How long should premarital counseling be? It depends on the one who's doing it. Ours is 5 weeks. We do 5 sessions. We do the last 6th one before they get married because that one is on sex and is on intimacy. So we do it closer to the wedding date for our couples. All right. How do you stay focused and on track when your spouse is an unbeliever? Focused and on track about concerning what? Because I'm pretty sure they were an unbeliever before you got married, unless they just recently stopped believing. But it would be the same way. Scripture tells us that the more we love them, the more we live a Christian life that's beyond, reading the Bible and thumping it on their head, the more likely we're able to win them to the Lord. So you love them, you bless them, and hopefully they give you the space to be the Christian that you are. So it just depends on the scenario that's going on. Should counseling continue after marriage? Yes. I tell couples, please do marriage maintenance. Me and my husband do marriage maintenance. From time to time, we'll call our pastors. We have gone to see a therapist. Like, you've got to do whatever you need to do in order for your marriage to be sustained and to remain healthy. Don't wait until your marriage is in conflict that you now start getting help. Like, it's like a car. When you get it, if you do mileage, maintenance, 3,000 miles, all of that, it's going to last you longer. Go to marriage retreats. People have been asking me for a marriage retreat for a while. We did one like 2 years ago. Maybe we'll do one next year. I found some really pretty places that I was like, oh, we could do a marriage retreat here, but you need to maintain your marriage. How do we deal with the spouse who may regret marrying you instead of someone else years later in the marriage? Did they tell you that initially? Are they telling you that now? There is nothing that you can do. That is their heart issue. I know that that hurts you and that is really painful. You need to look at why they're staying and you need to talk to them about that. Why are you still here? What is it about me that you feel like is worth you staying? And if you want to stay, then we need to work through this because you cannot sustain a marriage in regret. Like after some time, it's going to deteriorate or you're going to become roommates. So if they're still married to you, then you got to do the work and ask them if they're willing to go through counseling and work through that. Because if the regret continues to stay, over time, that thing is going to fall apart. Do you offer that type of counseling? So I haven't been taking one-on-one counseling for about 6 months now because I'm extremely busy. But I have been thinking that once we get out of this quarantine, I may offer some hours. But I don't. But I do have coaches and counselors that are part of Ask Dr.Faith that we could refer you to that may be taking counseling clients. So you could email them at email us info at askdrfaith.com. Doctor spelled out, and they can partner you. But we'll see. All right. I've always dated 10 years older, but at 38, I go too much older. I'm worried I'm taking care of senior citizens. So this is the thing. You also want to ask yourself why you've always dated that much older, because sometimes the reason people date that much older is because they have father wounds and they have father issues. I'm not saying you do, right? But I'm concerned when I look at someone's and there shouldn't be a lot of dating, right? But if I look and everybody that you date is 5 years older, 10 years older, is there something going on internally where you feel like you have to take care of people? Is there something going on internally that if there was a man that was not there, that you replace them with these older men? So I would really assess that, because it's not necessary. It's really not necessary to date those types of people older. I think if it happens once or twice, fine. But if it's a pattern, then there's something that's going on that I would really want to assess. And yes, when you marry people that are older, they're likely to get sicker. But it just depends on how they take care of themselves, really, because there's some young people that are not healthy at all. So it doesn't necessarily mean that. Someone said, please do the marriage retreat again. We're really going to think about it for February of 2020. That's what we are planning on. How do we know if the marriage needs counsel or therapy for maintenance? If it's doing great, you just go. You don't need to know. Like, if you're like, babe, we're in a really good space, let's go get some tools. You know that counseling and therapy is not just about when things are broken. Counselors and therapists give tools to make your sex life better, even if it's already good, make your communication better. So even the free webinar that I'm doing tonight on mastering communication and conflict resolution, it doesn't mean you have to have bad communication skills to learn. I get on a lot of free stuff because I just want to get more tools. So your marriage doesn't have to have a clue. If it's great, just add on to the tools. You need as many tools in your basket for it to survive. Someone said they're late. What is the topic? We're talking about relationships, marriage, and the likes. All right. Let's see. Marriage is an institution ordained by God, and people in marriage should understand God's purpose. Amen. Some want to stay in a marriage just to look good outside the box, but it's toxic on the inside. Yeah, that happens a lot. But those are the things that you need to prepare for, especially if you're single. But there's nothing that God cannot redeem or restore. All right. Any other questions before I jump off? How much time should I devote with God a day? I talk with him throughout the day, pray. Well, it depends on your time. I mean, some people have hours to devote. Some people only have 30 minutes. It just depends on your schedule and what you call a sacrifice. All right. Okay. I'm dealing with someone that I should have let go, but every time I close the door, I open it back up. How do I find? You have a soul tie. Most likely you have a soul tie. Soul ties are created out of intimacy. If you had sex with them, that's probably a door. If you were deeply involved in them emotionally, that's probably a door. You need to break that soul tie. You need to come out of agreement. You need to delete phone numbers. You need to unfollow on social media. And those are things that can help you move forward. How do I continue to stay abstinent and avoid temptations of the flesh while courting? Well, if you guys know that you're supposed to be married, get married soon, right? Paul tells us it's better to marry than to burn. But you know what? You need to have a prize. Your marriage is your prize, right? So if you say we're going to court for 6 months and then get engaged for 6 months and get married after a year, then you need to say this is a prize. Let's reward each other for that marriage night. And then you got to create boundaries. We don't hang out together at night. We try to do everything during the day. We try to do things within groups. We don't go on trips together. Those are practical things that you need to put in place. So in the book that I wrote, Journey to the Altar, there's some steps on that. Someone said, how do you break soul ties? You can go to my website, askdrfaith.com. I have some blogs on breaking soul ties and relationships, and you can read that. What are some resources for single mothers maintaining celibacy after divorce? Same thing that I just shared. Use wisdom, and whoever you decide to get in a relationship with, make sure that they're in it for the long haul, that they want to get married, and then use sex as a prize. It is a wonderful prize that you guys give each other, and then create boundaries. How do we know if the marriage? Okay, yep. All righty. Bless you guys. I'll place the links. You have, let's see, I don't see questions. I think I see statements. How to deal with a constant cheating spouse. Have had counseling multiple times. Well, you have biblical grounds for divorce. I don't believe that if someone cheats the first time, you need to leave them, or even the second time. I believe that those things that they can be worked on, those things that you guys can forgive. It takes a lot, and it is hard work. But if a person has cheated on you 3-4 times and they keep doing it, they're telling you that they don't value you. Now, I don't believe in divorce. So it's not one of those things that I just say, just leave. But if they've gone through counseling and they're not changing, there's something deeper that's going on. And if you have children, that it makes everything much harder. So you need to seek the Lord, and you need to say, God, what do you want to do? What do you want me to do with this? Because his actions are telling me he doesn't value me, he doesn't love me, and he doesn't want this. And you got to make that decision. Talk to your pastors, talk to the counselors. But if they've done it multiple times and they're not repenting, they're going to continue to do it. And so at some point, you got to figure out what is best. And research even says children fare better in relationships that are separate and healthy than being in a marriage that is toxic. Children that stay in a healthy marriage, in a toxic marriage where parents are fighting, cheating, and bickering, don't do as well as children where parents separate and learn how to co-parent. So you got to pray, you got to talk to your pastors, and you got to decide what is best for your life and what God is asking you to do with your children. The free webinars tonight. So I've been doing a series of free webinars for the last 3 weeks to help people in quarantine. This is the third one. We have one last free one next week, and then I am done with my free giveaways. They've been phenomenal. All right. Let's see. I feel like canceling my prayers for asking for marriage because the wrong people are attracted to me. No, if people are attracted to you, whether they stay or not is your decision. So if the wrong people are attracted to you, you want to ask yourself, why do I attract these people? It's not that it's the wrong people necessarily. It could be something that's within you. But if someone is an idiot and they're attracted to you, you don't have to date them. You get to choose. So keep saying no to the ones that are not right, and eventually the right one will come. How do you deal with differences in sexual desires in marriage that continue to come up? So what are those differences? Because in sexual, concerning sex, there's differences in arousal, right? So there's some people who may have difficulty with sexual arousal. Then there's some people who have difficulty with sexual desire. So you could have desire, but you struggle with arousal issues. You could have arousal issues, but when you're not able to, go through with sex. So what's going on? I would need more information. But you guys need to figure out, is it hormonal? Is it emotional? And you need to talk about sex. In order for sex to be good in a marriage, you've got to talk about it. You got to talk about the difficult things. You got to talk about the hard things. You got to talk about the misunderstandings within your sexual relationship for it to blossom. What if you've been getting a prophetic word for 7 years, God is bringing your husband and you're still waiting? Then you keep waiting. I mean, I had been getting words about my husband for 12 years before he showed up. Right before he showed up, people were saying he's coming really soon. He's closer than you think. And it wasn't until another 2 years. So our timeline is not the same as God's timeline. What prophecy does is it helps you be encouraged that it's going to happen eventually, but it may not just be in your timeline. How do we stop attracting the wrong person? Do the internal work. What are my values? What do I want in a spouse? Write them down. And they can't be it's not like 6'4". It's not outward, hardworking, loves God, faithful. Be clear about what you desire. Be clear about what you bring to the table, because what you bring to the table is also connected to who you attract. All right. Do you have dating advice for women ministers who are looking to court to be married? The same. I think that you should enjoy it. I think you should be open. My good friend Sophia Ruffin shared a video the other day. She's in a courtship right now, and she was talking about how she wanted to be open about it, because sometimes when you're in ministry, you feel like you need to keep it private. Now, when I was courting my husband, our story is funny and amazing, but I didn't share publicly for 6 months. But you just enjoy it. You are a woman before you're a minister. That was one of the ways I knew my husband was my husband, because he was like, I don't care that you're a pastor or a prophet or whatever. You need a husband, and I want to be your husband. And so that allowed me to be feminine. That allowed me to be pursued. That allowed me to be courted, and allow yourself to enjoy that whole process. The main thing that you want to look for, if you're a minister and you're a woman, your husband doesn't have to be a minister. Your husband, when I met my husband, his focus is business. It's still business. He loves business. He's an apostolic entrepreneur, and he was finishing grad school. So I wasn't marrying him to say, we're going to pastor a church together. That wasn't my goal. I just needed someone I could come home to, that we enjoyed each other. We laughed together. And so if you're in ministry, your goal for marriage should be, when all the ministry is done, can I come home to you and be happy about that? Because if you marry for ministry, that happens 20 minutes, 1 hour every Sunday, or you have a speaking engagement here and there, and you're going to be miserable at home. What if they're abusive and won't acknowledge it? Run. I mean, what is there to say about that? Those are basic things. If someone is abusing you emotionally and physically, the nature of God is not in that. So get away. If they lie in therapy, you already knew. But this is the thing, guys. That's why I like to prepare singles. You knew there were liars before you got married. I get hard on married folks that you knew this about this person. Now, if you didn't know God, right, then that's understandable. You were both in darkness. But if you knew God, you knew their patterns, and you still married them, one, it has nothing to do with God, and you got to do what you need to do to move forward. All right. Is there a normal time frame while doing the work, breaking the soul ties? It depends on how long you were married or you were in that relationship. But you can renounce it, come out of agreement with it, break the connection, and then just surrender your thoughts, your memories, your emotions to the Lord so that they don't keep coming up in your spirit and in your soul. Yeah, I think we've done quite a bit today on marriage and relationships. So I'll talk to you guys tonight. It's bit.ly/mind, body, and soul. You can check it out on my different platforms. It's free, and it will be at 9 o'clock. So I look forward to talking to you. Have a great, great day. Bless you guys. Bye-bye. Oh, one more thing. Our life coaching certification program. So we are registering for that, and payment plan option is going to end at the end of April. So if you plan to be certified as a coach or as a mentor, and you've been looking for a program that integrates faith, mental health, that you're trained by a psychologist, I would encourage you guys to sign up for that. And that's bit.ly/coach and mentor. So we're almost at our cap actually for students, but I think I'm going to expand it because I know we're in a season where people need to be certified to be able to do some of this work that God is calling them to do. So we'll probably hold on for a little bit. Thank you guys so much for watching and for being on Instagram. I don't even know if you could share, but if you can, do so. I don't go live often on Instagram, but if this was a blessing, share it with those around you. All right. Talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.